Hello. Now we'll see the application of decorator functions. So again, here here we have this function called timed, which takes the function and try to calculate how much time this a particular function takes. Again, in the inner function, we have used the wrap decorator, which used earlier, and then in this wrap decorator, we are passing function parameter, right? And then we have this inner function which calculate the time it takes. Again, we are not going to see this thing in a detail. You can look at that later on. But again, the meaning of this decorator is calculate how much time this function takes to execute the code, right? Let's run this, right? And now, so again, now let's create another function. So here we are getting a Fibonacci, like here we are getting a function to calculate the Fibonacci of n number. Again, there are three techniques. One is recursive, loop, and the functional programming, right? We'll try to see, again, the point is not to understand how the recursive loop and the functional programming work, right? This is a basic thing. But the point is, we have to but the point is, we have to understand how this timed function is being used and how much time does these functions takes, right? How much time each techniques is being is taking, right, to calculate the Fibonacci number, and then we can do that using the decorator, right? Now let's first use the recursive approach. Here we have created a function called calc recursive fib with text n. If n is less than equals 2, it return 1. Otherwise, it will do this recursive approach, that is n minus 1 plus n minus 2, right? Now let's define this function. We can check this Fibonacci number of 3, which is 2, 6, which is 8. But now let's decorate this function. For that, we have created another function called fib recurse, right? And then it is returning this recursive of Fibonacci number. Again, we could have even decorated this function, right? We could have decorated this function over here as well, but we are not doing so, right? So it is just like we have added the extra line of code over here, right? Let's run this. When we execute this, we are getting this Fibonacci recursive 33 took 0.58 to run. This is the value. Again, we are getting the value for 34. Again, so now we see that we have some extra line of code because of the time decorator here. Again, now, so what we have done over here is we are returning this function over this function. So we have not directly decorated this function over here, right? And then we are doing the same thing. Now we have this Fibonacci calculated this recursive approach, and now we are decorating the same function. If we'll decorate the same function, then if you'll execute this, you'll get this entire code over there, right? You will get this how much time it is taking, right, to run that, right? So every calculation is being tracked, right? Every calculation we are tracking, and then how much time it is taking, and then the value we are getting as 55, right? We can also use this timed function, and here we have this function called fib loop to calculate the Fibonacci using the loop techniques, right? Now let's try to run this. When we try to run this, we are getting this has taken the time 0.00003 seconds, right? So it's easy, right? So now you know how to do this. Again, the same thing we can do this with the reduce method, right? If the n is 1, we'll do this. If the n is 2, so again it's a long this theory, right? You can read this theory later on, but the question is, here we have created a functions fib reduce to calculate the Fibonacci, right? And then we have decorated with the timed function. When we do this, here we are getting the result, right? Now we can run a quick comparison between various timed implementation. We can run this fib recurse, fib loop, and fib reduce. How much time does every algorithm takes? right? So fib recurs have taken 1.5, which is higher. Fib loop is 0.0005, and fib 35 is again the same thing. Here we have this 350, right? Here we have this 3. So again, I think so loop takes slightly lower time, right, compared to all other techniques, right? This is how a decorator works. This is the one of the application of the decorators, right? Thank you.